All right. Hi there. It's been a little while since we've done this. You can tell my hair's getting longer. May have this in a ponytail by the time this is all done. That would be a look, wouldn't it? Um, what we've been talking about and what I've been wanting to deal with throughout this time is I have a heart for us as followers of Jesus to navigate crises like this in our lives by faith, trusting God in the midst of these difficult times. And and exactly how we go about doing that. What does that even look like? To say that, here we have this worldwide pandemics going on, but I choose to trust God in the midst of that. What does it even look like? And we've looked at um, already several different kinds of ideas about this, about kind of settling ourselves in the character of God and thinking about who He is. And I really believe that that is really the key to all of this, is understanding the who God is and the reality of that, and the reality of who we are, and how we live out of the spiritual truths that we believe about the world. We've thrown around the question, do we really believe that what we believe is really real? And if I do believe that, if I understand life that way, then shouldn't it make a difference? Shouldn't we, of all people, have kind of a different understanding of the way that this works, to be a follower of Jesus in the midst of this? One of the things that I looked at was from Philippians chapter 4. We've been kind of pacing through that a little bit in some of these, and it starts there. Paul starts in like verse 4, where he says, rejoice in the Lord. And I'll say it again, rejoice in the Lord always. And I'll say it again, rejoice. It's so important, let me say it again. And we said that really carried through that theme of that the very first thing that we ought to be doing in this is we ought to be planting ourselves firmly in our belief about who God is. To rejoice in the Lord, he's not saying rejoice in the circumstances. He's not saying be happy about what you're going through. He's not saying that you should just have a different perspective about the kind of what's happening in the world around you. What he's saying is that we need to first and foremost remember who God is. We need to put our faith and trust in the character of God. We need to rejoice in Him, that we know Him, we are known by Him, we love Him, He loves us, He is a father to us. All of those things that are true of God, we need to take the time to sit in those and to remember those and to contemplate those and to make truth and faith statements about those things. I choose to put my trust in a God who cares about me, in a God who loves me, in a God who is the God of hope. And we choose to make those kinds of faith statements along the way through this. And then he kind of pulls one of those out of there and he says, remember, the Lord is near. And possibly he's talking about Jesus coming back, but I think even more what he's saying is that God is right there with you. No matter what you're going through, no matter what the circumstances are, the coronavirus is, it's just another thing, really. It's just another, life kind of event, a big one, certainly. But remember, in the midst of all this, God is there. God is near. And we talked about that and how important it is for us to hold on to that truth, that God has come alongside of us. That He is extending His power around us. That we're not facing this alone. We shouldn't feel like we are alone in this. We need to put our faith, our trust, our statements. The trust statements that we make, that I am not alone in this. I am in the presence of God. He is standing here with me. We're looking at this together. I've got this perspective. And then finally he says, okay, and once you've done that, once you have a handle on that, then if you have things to ask of God, well, okay, now you should ask Him. And he says, with everything by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. Okay, so I think first of all, what happens is and Jesus does this in the Lord's Prayer, once I am once I'm sitting down in the character of God and I'm remembering him, Jesus said, start this way: Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We put ourselves firmly in the place of who God is and the character of God, and that changes then, I think, our prayers. I might have been coming with some prayers about, being fearful or anxious or wondering where things are, but once I consider who God is and I consider his character, then I think it begins to redefine the things that I'm asking for and the ways that I'm asking, and that I am putting more trusting kinds of prayers together. I am beginning to respond in different ways in my prayers. Does that make sense? Uh, so he says, let your prayer, you can bring your prayers and petitions, but he throws in that little phrase, with thanksgiving, and that has always been kind of Jesus did this, and Paul does this. All of a sudden they throw in this little twist, something you weren't quite expecting, and Paul says, you can bring think about who God is, rejoice in him, remember he's near, and now bring your requests, but do it with thanksgiving. And I'm always like, oh man, in a situation like this, in a situation where this big kind of crisis is going on, pandemic is happening in the world, why would we start with thanksgiving? What's the whole deal with that? Well, again, I think that if you think about what I'm thankful, let's say, Ann cooks dinner, and I'm thankful for that. What is it that if I say, Ann, I just want to thank you for cooking dinner for me. So what is that really saying when I say thank you for doing that? It says, hey, I didn't do this. You didn't have to do this for me. It wasn't required of you to do this for me. And I didn't do it myself. And yet here I have something to eat. Here I have something to drink. Here I have a good meal, all because of your generosity, all because of your grace and your, that you love me and you want to give something to me. And, so when Paul says, do this with thanksgiving, this is what he wants us to do. Thanksgiving, when we are thankful and when we take the time to be thankful, we don't do this nearly enough because we are terribly forgetful people about this. We take things for granted, right? When I am thankful and I am able and willing to take the time to kind of go through my life, take stock of my life and say, man, if it weren't for you, God, I wouldn't have this, and I wouldn't have this, and I wouldn't have this, and I am thankful for this, and thank you for providing this for me. And we were just talking the other day about how much God has provided for us in the past, and getting checks. When we were, young pastors and stuff, kids in school, getting checks that we didn't anticipate, and God providing for us in all kinds of different ways, and we were so thankful for that. Thankfulness is always a recognition that I cannot do this on my own, that I am totally dependent upon God. I am totally dependent and reliant upon his provision in my life, his strength in my life, his being with me in my life to help me endure and persevere. I don't do any of those things without his involvement in my life. So when I say thank you, what I'm doing is I am recognizing the presence of God in my life. I'm recognizing that God is near, and I am kind of rehearsing this. And as I thank him, it is just another way of bringing the presence of God to bear on the situations that I'm in. So if I have something that I want to ask God, God, will you provide for me if I lose my job? And I begin to take stock and to thank him for all the ways that he's provided for me in the past, all of a sudden I am struck with the reality that God has been my provider all through my life. And we might struggle a little bit. It may not be in exactly the ways that I think he's going to take care of me, but God is going to take care of me. And I'm reminded of that as I'm thankful. So I just think it is a good practice for us to pause. We've all talked about this being time to hit reset kind of thing, for us to pause in the midst of the fear and the crisis and all of that, take time to think about who God is, and then, and then that he's here with us and how much he has given us. And I start to recite all those things, and man, we are blessed beyond belief, right? God has given us so much, uh, and all of us can find something that we are grateful for and thankful for. And I think what happens in that is, in the Old Testament, what they used to do was, and I titled this thing that I've got a pile of rocks in my living room. In the Old Testament, what they used to do was, whenever God did something miraculous, he crossed the Jordan River, split the Jordan River, and they crossed over into the land. They stacked 12 huge stones there, so that every time they saw that pile of rocks, they'd be reminded of what God had done for them in the past. And they built into their lives a visual of why God was trustworthy. And what they said about it was, every time you walk past these things, tell your children that this is what God has done, that this is how God brought you into the land. And man, I just think we need to do that kind of thing. I think that God invites us to incorporate into our lives places where we can think about the character of God, remember what he's like, remember the way that he has blessed us in the past. Times of thanksgiving build into our lives, times of gratefulness build into our lives. And because this is the first place that trust comes. Trust, navigating through this whole thing by trust, happens first as we recognize the part that God plays in our lives. And that's everything for us as followers of Jesus. That's everything. So how do we do that? And I'm going to invite you, because you guys have tons of ways that you incorporate these things. You build, put piles of stone in your living room. I always think about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where he's sculpting out of the mashed potatoes, the mountain in Utah or Wyoming or wherever that was. And I think it was Wyoming, right? Or I don't know, wherever it was. And then he builds a whole replica of it. He does it, builds a sculpture of it, and in his living room. And that's kind of what I'm thinking, is those are the kinds of things we need to build in. And not quite that crazy, but those are the kinds of things we need to build into our lives. Things that remind us of God's grace to us. For some of us, that's, morning devotions. That's a great place for that to happen. You get out of bed, you open your Bible, and you remember what God has done, or you, through prayer, you do that. Some of you need to get a whiteboard marker and scrawl on your mirrors in your bathrooms, so the first thing you look at, rather than the face that you wake up with, is the fact that you can trust God and he is there with you, and you're not in this alone. Whether you are building other opportunities into your life throughout the day, where you are journaling, or writing lists of all that God has done for you, or you're take a walk on in order to take stock of those things, whatever it is that you use to build into your life this realization that God is with you and he cares about you and loves you. Those are the kinds of things. You want to make it through this in a trusting way? Well, then build these times into your life of ways that you can remember who God is. If that takes a stack of stones in your living room to do that, then do that. If it takes carrying around, we used to carry around those little silver metal crosses in our pocket. If it takes that, do that. Whatever it takes for you to remind yourself that this is the case. This is what God has done. This is the way he has helped me in the past. This is the way that, and build that thanksgiving in your lives. That's going to go a long way in a trust response, so that you can make those kinds of trust statements. This is the God that I know. This is the God that I will trust through this. All right. We'll talk more about this as time goes on. Okay. Walking through this with you. Appreciate it, guys. I love you. Bye.